What blew prisoners' minds about life outside after serving long sentences? Marcelli was locked up for 20 years before he was in jail with me. He got locked up again for beating up somebody who was talking crap at a bus station. The guy he beat up was actually talking to someone else on a Bluetooth headset. About 10 years ago, I was unemployed and went to one of those employment centers looking for a job for the first time in a long time, which ended up basically being some sort of internet cafe where you use the computers to job search, create resumes, and other stuff. I sat down by an older gentleman who just stared into the screen with his hands in his lap. An employee came by and asked him if he needed help, to which he agreed and stated he had been incarcerated for about 30 years and had never used a computer. She sat down and told him to use the mouse to move the cursor to an icon, etc., etc. This dude gave the mouse a sharp jab with his finger like he was pushing an elevator button. That slid the mouse across the mousepad and onto the table. The look on the lady's face was priceless when she realized she had to teach this guy how to use a computer from ground fricking zero. She was puzzled where to even begin. My dad is a prison chaplain. One of his inmates had been in for about 30 years and got out last year. My dad got a call from him a few days later. "Chap, did you know they have toilets that flush themselves?" My mother just got released after a 15-year prison sentence. The weirdest thing to her is the cell phones. She thinks it's crazy that everyone is attached at the hip to their phones, and that you can look up anything in an instant. Also, gas prices. They definitely threw her for a loop. She offered to gas my vehicle up because I helped her run some errands. She didn't realize it was going to cost $50. She also thinks it's wild that my brothers and I can play games together and not be in the same house. The first time she called in and I told her I was playing Destiny 2 with my brothers, she thought they were actually in the living room with me. It still freaks her out that we live in different states and can play together. That one was posted in 2015 and is likely a result of equal parts the time locked away and the classic parents are confused by technology issue. Online games were still kind of a thing in the 90s and noughties. I was told this story by an ex-felon who had a cellmate that finally got released after 30-plus years in prison. He gave the guy his phone number because he knew that transitioning into the real world would be rough. He went on to say that he got a call from his cellmate at a grocery store in a corner, crying because the selection in the store was too much for him to handle. Mostly the different varieties of items, different brands have grown in the past 30-plus years. Also, the use of self-checkout machines can be confusing. I learned about this in Business 101 in college, that if you overwhelm your customer with too many options, it leads to lower sales. Sometimes that happens to me in a grocery store. Too many options, so I buy nothing. Like having a library of hundreds of Steam games, and after an hour of deciding and playing the first 5 minutes of a few, you play nothing and go back to Reddit. Saw a dude on the news who'd been in jail for like 50 or 60 years. He said the craziest thing was seeing all the crazy colored Gatorades. That, and he thought everyone was an FBI agent because of their earbuds. I remember working at McDonald's and having an ex-convict come in and being outraged at the prices. A Big Mac was twice the price he was used to. Not a felon, but I did have a lengthy phone call with an ex-con at work once where I went in circles trying to explain the concept of attachments to emails. I also had to explain that fax and email were separate things. What's she in for? You know how your mother always said, "I brought you into this world, I can take you out of it too"? Well, his mum tried it. Was at the corner store and some guy walks in with his buddy who was acting a little weird. He points to some Red Bull and asks, "What are those?" His buddy tells him, "They get you jacked, like amped up, get you going." His buddy left with like 5 of them. I'm assuming he just got out of lockup. It gave me a chuckle. I work with a lot of felons. One of them had been in prison for 38 years. He said everything is different. The cars are so different and quiet. Everyone is on their phones, and phones are weird. People have phones in their pockets. Vehicles definitely were a lot noisier in the older days, and street scenes were a bigger assault on your ears. I remember it from the early to mid-90s, and I've also seen archive footage from the 60s and 70s where it's slightly worse. 38 years presumably also means that he went from having never used a credit or debit card to a world where a lot of people don't carry cash and buy things online. I feel like long-term prison is actually a form of time travel. I went to rehab a few years ago, and one of the guys there with me just got out of prison after a 20-year sentence for being a huge crystal dealer. He said cell phones blew his mind, and he's so confused about gas pumps now because of the option to pay with cards at the pump and how different they look. Just wait until he sees one with a frickin' TV in it. I knew a guy who was in for around 15 years. I told him I like video games, and he was asking if I had a chance to play this or that game on PS2. I said I didn't, and he said I should get it. They weren't classics or anything, but sports games that came out at the time. In 2015, I met a guy who went into jail in 1997 and had just got out. The big thing he noticed was that there weren't many large groups of youth out and about like when he was a kid. He said the saddest thing he saw was going to the local park and seeing almost nobody there at 6 p.m. When he went in the 1990s, there were typically around 50 to 60 young people hanging out, skating around and socializing. He said people weren't out on their stoops socializing as much. He doesn't see nearly as many people out and about on Friday and Saturday nights. I suppose the way we socialize has changed so much since then. Back then, the only way you could socialize was by leaving your house and hanging out with your friends. Even doing nothing with friends was preferable to just hanging out inside. Today, people don't do that as much. This is also the biggest thing for me. Youth used to be absolutely everywhere and aren't really out as much. The thing you said about parks and stoops is so true. Parks used to be always filled with large groups of young people aged 16 to 28. And now they're all empty or near empty. I don't know the reason why they aren't out, but youth culture in general just doesn't seem to be there the way it was in the 1990s. A reason is probably because parents nowadays don't want their kids running around at night, especially in winter. They don't want their children out late and without a parent watching them. Whenever I used to go to the park, it would always be before tea or it would be a lunch event with friends. Now, a lot of people will hang out with friends at shopping centers or at home because there's more stuff to do there. We have our consoles, which can have up to 4 players, but usually there'll be more people, so people will swap after a match. Haha, not even close to as long, but I was in jail before, during, and after the 2016 election, and it was weird to see people slowly finding out that Trump had become president. The police didn't tell anyone who had won, and we had to wait for all the new inmates to come in. Most people thought they were lying when they said Trump won, especially people who had been in since before Obama. I was in for 3 days back in '99. Last meal before I went in, McRib. I got out and the McRib was gone. I went for 2 months. When I went in, everyone was playing PS3. Got mine stolen, and when I got out, everyone was playing PS4, and I had neither. Can you imagine trying to understand memes? That's a long ride, man. The problem is that now they're just one inside joke inside of another inside joke inside of another inside joke. If you weren't there from the beginning, it's hopeless. I keep picturing the scene from Shawshank Redemption where Brooks is released from prison after decades of incarceration. The world has changed so much that he's overwhelmed and doesn't last long on the outside. I can't imagine how hard it must be to acclimatize if you don't have good support. That scene was so sad. If I remember the quote correctly, didn't he say he was in there for 50 years, released in 1955, and going into prison in 1905? Coming out after 2 world wars, television, radio, cars, and everything. That is an incredibly sad part of that movie. I don't know if more has changed for an inmate coming out who was incarcerated in the 90s, but the way we operate in society may have changed more, if anything, just by the influence of smartphones. Something about old guys looking at the world passing them by messes me up more than anything. I remember going down with my pops to get some ice cream a while back, and he just asked for a cone, and they asked him what kind he wanted, and he said he didn't know, so they just started listing off the whatever 40 flavors they had. And he just had this tragic, confused look on his face, and I remember leaving with him, and he said to me, "I don't even understand ice cream anymore." That crap makes me sad for some reason. Life is fleeting. Time goes by so quickly. I'm 40 now. That number messed with me for a while when I hit my birthday in January. 20 doesn't seem that far away. What messes with me now is music. There are no more decades to me. 80s, 90s, 2000s, sure. Everything after that is a mishmash of stuff. Man, I just turned 40 2 months ago. I feel you. For me, it's technology. I was always on the cutting edge. I ran a BBS from middle school all through the 90s, was into the pirate underground scene, was always building PCs and overclocking, and became a software dev and knew everything cool on the internet. Now it's all Snapchat and Instagram on phones, and the apps are so poorly designed and hard to navigate. Not to mention, so many of them harvest your metadata and user info, so it's downright scary to install any app. And new tech comes out so quickly I don't even care about it anymore. It feels bad, man. A friend of my dad's just got released a while back. He was in for about 8 years, and the other day he was talking to my dad about how vaping is so healthy for you, and he has individual ringtones for each of his contacts. He's hilarious, but we don't mention anything about how behind he is. It's not as extreme an amount of time as others, but you can still tell he's adapting. Wait, is it weird to have individual ringtones for people? Well, I'm an old young person, apparently. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I used to work in prison. I recall a lifer going out for the day and being mind-blown by ATMs and the moving conveyor belts at the supermarkets. Yeah, they probably don't know what Reddit is. To be fair, I don't exactly know what Reddit is either. No one can be told what Reddit is. You have to see it for yourself. My best friend just got out in January after 12 years. He can't handle the awesomeness of Netflix. Also, booking stuff online. I'm still teaching him Amazon. Oh, and you pick your seat at the movie theater. I'm not really over that yet either. He loves that YouTube now has a video for everything. You want to fix your golf swing? There's a video. Want to properly cut up a papaya or tie a certain kind of fly fishing lure? There's a video. Obviously, smartphones and whatnot have been a big difference, but the big difference to me is simply that I rarely see kids outside. Anyone who remembers the 80s and 90s remembers that past 5 p.m. there were groups of youth aging 16 to 28 literally roaming everywhere. I mean, just huge groups of youth standing around at corners, drinking and smoking. The parks were filled with them doing substances and whatnot, and after 9 p.m. blocks were basically overrun with youths. Parties were everywhere. Even the losers had zero trouble finding some crazy party to go to. I've been out for a while and I traveled all over the States. The one universal change I will say is that I rarely see that kind of youth culture anywhere anymore. I'm not sure if there are just 3/4 less kids or if the kids are just all inside now. Youth culture used to be in your face constantly. People used to stand on the street corners with boom boxes and have breakdance competitions, with plenty of substances passed around. I haven't seen anything remotely similar to that. Another thing is crime. Crime used to be everywhere. Even normal, well-to-do people knew about and were often even slightly engaged in some form of crime. They often had siblings that were into crime, or they knew neighbors who were into it. If you ever wanted anything extra done that was illegal, there was always guys you could go to. There was your normal life, then there was your sort of underground life. Almost everyone had one or knew plenty of people that were into it. I remember as a youth, me and my friends used to sell Lucy cigarettes and transport stolen goods from store to store for this seedy Italian guy on our block. In my early 20s, we used to help find guys to pay off landlords to let us throw parties on their rooftops. Everyone did this sort of stuff. That was considered kind of normal youth stuff back then. Today, that would seem like something only a serious criminal would do. Even our parents had their dealings with shady characters. Those are really the 2 biggest changes I've noticed anyway. The looks people give you when you say, "I only have cash." Not me, but a friend's older brother was in prison for 8 years from 2003 to 2011. He was most shocked about how movies had changed and how much detail they had now. Also, was shocked about computers. I met a guy who'd been in since the 90s and he kinda dressed and styled like Vanilla Ice when he got out. I think his dad still had all his clothes. I only served a couple of months back in 2015. I was released alongside a man who was in between 20 to 25 years. I forget exactly, but it was a lot. All of the people in my program were in great spirits after only being in for a couple of months. We had our girlfriends picking us up, talking about our plans, just bullcrapping around. This guy looked scared. As I wanted to leave every single one of my possessions behind, this guy had everything with him. A TV that still has the RCA connection, a CD player, all his clothes, some food, and a couple of shoes. He knew he was in for a shock. I have an employee who served 11 years. Coming back to real life is hard for these dudes. He won't go into a convenience store if it's too crowded. He can't handle himself around proper people because he's too desocialized. Oof. Not to devalue this man's clear trauma, but I know at least a few people who feel like that generally, especially post-pandemic. If a prison can turn a regular, functional person to that level of anxiety, you've got to feel sorry for them. My brother is in now, incarcerated in November 2017, and won't get out until 2031 unless a miracle happens. I can't imagine what kind of world he'll be rejoining. I wish there was a feature on Reddit to bring me back to this thread once there were some more answers in a few years. It sounds like a good topic. What happened to Legos? I'm not saying it's bad, I just want to know what happened. Legos lost their patent, leading to the Lego apocalypse, and so to be able to compete with the new companies, they started focusing on more themed kits, making it easy for them to latch on to whatever was popular at the time. I miss when you could just go buy a big box of mixed bricks. My best friend was in jail for a considerable amount of time. He didn't know how to use the new touchscreen washing machines, iPhone, or even the dishwasher. Also, wireless headphones blew his mind. Had to teach him how to call and message people and use apps. He's addicted to social media now, haha. Family member got released after about 5 years. He said the most surprising thing is all the radio stations still play the same music, like only 1/3 of it is new to him. He wasn't in for that long, but it still shines a light on the music industry and radio. A guy I knew who went in the 90s always used to say the biggest difference is white women all of a sudden got big butts. How much shish kebabs have changed? We had some shish kebabs, then we started calling them kebabs, now it's just babs, so it went from shish kebab to kebab to bab. I wasn't in prison, but enlisted in the military in early '09 and did most of my training here in the States for that year, so I wasn't completely out of the loop, but after finishing boot camp and training for my job in 2009, I was stationed overseas for 2 years. Upon arrival to my new duty station, I got an iPhone 3GS, but I quickly lost it within a month, and never bothered getting another one. On base, the internet was practically 56K modem speeds, for whatever reason. I think it was due to insufficient infrastructures to provide service to so many people. So my internet usage was limited because of slow speeds and limited free time at work. I remembered Christmas and New Year of 2010, Command didn't approve leave for us to go home, so that we would be ready to deploy if necessary. Everyone ended up getting all boozed up at the barracks, and I mostly spent my time playing PS3 offline because of aforementioned crappy internet. So basically, from 2009 through 2011, during the rise of online video streaming services and smartphones, I missed out on all of that. It wasn't prison or anything, so I was aware, but didn't experience any of it firsthand. Coming back to the States the beginning of 2012 was like traveling a couple of years into the future. Netflix used to arrive by mail, but all of a sudden, the fact that I could access any show I wanted from a single website blew my mind. In the span of the 2 or 3 years, internet speeds increased exponentially for the same cost. It didn't help that I spent the whole time with archaic internet while on base. In 2009, I had a PlayStation Portable for gaming and had to lug around multiple UMDs. Now I can just go to the App Store and download from a plethora of mobile apps on my smartphone, all at 4G speeds. So while it wasn't nearly as drastic as being in prison from the early 2000s until 2018, even those couple of years in the early 2010s where I was away were pretty crazy when I returned. I can only imagine what it'd be like for anyone locked away for 5, 10, or 20 or more years. I bet they wonder why, before they entered prison, people used to say that they graduated from college, and now that they just say graduated college, that would be an unsettling shift. My uncle was incarcerated in '85. Several years ago, we went for a visit and took snacks. The plastic grocery bag blew his mind. My mum was locked up for 10 years starting in the early 2000s. The first time I paused live TV, she lost her frickin' mind. I was actually friends with a guy who was on death row for 20 years. He said it was the cell phones. Who sits for 20 years? And how does he tell you? And where is he now? How does he know about cells? It's actually not unusual at all. The problem is with the death penalty is if you make a mistake and convict an innocent, you've irrevocably screwed up. So those on death row get a lot of appeals. Capital punishment is extremely costly because of the court fees, more costly than not having the death penalty in fact. Not only that, but innocent people occasionally are executed despite the checks in place. I was in prison from 2003 until 2011. Wasn't really surprised by much of anything. Inside, we watched television every day, and the commercials prepared me for the technology. I had the New York Times delivered to my cell or cube daily. We had radios, news, BBC, NPR, etc. Smartphones really weren't that difficult to grasp. I came of age during the early internet era, so smartphones were just mini computers with touchscreens. If anything, technology was more user-friendly than it had been before I went away. You see, it's not the technology that's difficult to adapt to, it's the people. There's a prison culture, and once you adapt to it, you learn to respect and even appreciate it. You see the same people every day, and it's a tense, testosterone-driven environment. Negotiating the unspoken rules means understanding the importance of showing respect without showing fear, and the only way to do that honestly is to get in touch with yourself, to overcome your insecurities, to quiet your righteous anger, to develop a sense of when it's time to move out of the way and when it's time to stand your ground. The culture forces you to become a man among men. Coming home to a society of selfish, arrogant, disrespectful, self-assured adult children who glorify their minor struggles on social media and perpetuate this culture of self-identified victimization was, and continues to be, difficult. In prison, not only will you not be celebrated for your so-called courage in aggrandizing your victimization, you'll be mocked for not handling the problem like a man. Out here, it seems almost a contest as to who can cry the loudest and blame the most. In my personal life, the same people crying wolf and routinely shifting blame are the ones who dismiss me as a human being because of my prison experience. Ironically, my prison experience is the same reason I dismiss them, and so I feel a chasm has grown between the man I became in prison and the culture I came home to as a 32-year-old adult. And every time I sense someone of relevance in my life dismiss my opinion, subtly condescend to me, gossip about me just out of earshot, etc., I feel that chasm grow. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.